In today's episode, we discuss the 2020 show episode about Karen Reed. What did Karen have to say? Did they fairly represent both sides? How much evidence did they address? This is another case that Carlos and I do not agree on, and we debate a lot of the issues in this case, especially at the end, so stick around. You won't want to miss it. As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. We're going to talk today about the Karen Reed 2020 that we just saw and the show. And so, yeah, that was a little interesting. I was hoping for more, but there were some nuggets in there that I think we could talk about. And for those who aren't overly familiar with the Karen Reed trial, Karen Reed is on trial for unaliving her boyfriend, and there's a lot of I don't know, concern that maybe she was framed in this. So I think this sits on both sides of the fence, at least for me and you, who, you know, I'm a guilter when it comes to Brian Kohberger. You're a pro burger. I'm kind of sitting on the guilty side for Karen Reed, and you think there's just too much going on the other side to
I think she's innocent.
Even contemplate her being guilty. So so let's start with the show itself. So we watched it today. It came out, I believe, yesterday or the day before, but
I think last night.
Last night. So we watched it today, and it's about 2 hours long. And I thought, oh man, this thing's going to be packed full of information. And I think we realized very early on that this was going to be Karen Reed's kind of vision of things, because this is her giving an interview to 2020. So I think they were being a little, you know, trying to be slighted a little bit her way. I don't think they asked her a lot of tough questions.
Oh, no, not at all.
They did ask a couple, you know, and they pressed her on a couple things, but
this was her, I think, first time.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she spoke out to interview cameras that were shoved in her face, but on a show like this. So,
and it looks like they even followed her around a little bit, you know, during the trial. So you know, she was they caught her before she went to court, and I think they were in a hotel room at one point. So, you know, they were part of the process. So they were kind of, you know, nobody knew how this whole thing was gonna end. So it was kind of curious to watch that. But your initial take, you know, or opinion of the show, I guess.
Well, you're so observant because I didn't even catch the change of interview rooms or anything like that. Like,
yeah,
I didn't realize that. So
yeah. Well, do you remember?
That's how you watch things.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when she started crying because her mom says how
yes.
So that was when she was in
Getting
the hotel.
Dressed for her. So we're talking about them showing her talking about choosing outfits. She said she wanted to dress like the lawyers and look professional at court. And yeah, she talked about how it was important to her mom. So she got emotional.
Well, it was important for the feedback that she gets from her mom.
Yes.
Yeah. And that made her emotional, which I think some of the knock against her was that she was a little bit on the other side, not emotional about this, but she even got admonished during trial for laughing and, you know, having these looks on her face, you know, and there's like, you know, I think they even said it during the show one time. There's one thing, you know, you could play poker with Karen Reed because it's all on her face. So if she's got a pair of aces, you know she's got a pair of aces. If she's got a bluff hand, you know she's bluffing because you can read her like a book. You know, in her face.
I watched the trial and I thought she was pretty stoic the whole time.
Oh yeah, no, they showed about 10 still frames of her.
Not the way I saw it. You asked me about my opinion of the show.
Yeah, overall. Yeah. What's your opinion?
I did not like the way they sequenced their events. There were portions where they would go down one track of a topic and then all of a sudden insert someone testifying about something that they talked about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are they going to that right now? And of course, in a 2-hour show, there's no way to pack every single piece of evidence or controversy that went on
Right.
in this case, but they missed a lot of big ones.
There's
I
some
thought.
key points. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was okay,
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah. I didn't love the show, but I think it sparked our re-interest in the case, and
Yep.
we're sitting here right now. So
Yes.
I guess it served its purpose. So
because we started talking about it again, and it's debate time.
it is debate time. So I guess to set up the debate a little bit, you know, along with the Brian Koberger Idaho 4 case, you know, I've kind of landed on the guilty side. You've landed on the, you know, not so much, you know, not so fast. I think we're on the same camp here. So, you know, we may have differencing of opinion, but I think at the end of the day, it's what you guys think, and, you know, where you land on this. You know, I'm curious because spoiler alert, it was a mistrial. So we're going to be doing this again.
Yes.
Pretty soon. So
in January 2025.
Yeah, so wow. All right, so let's kick it off. I think they start the show with showing how everybody was kind of rallying around Karen Reed, which 2020 was like, wow, I can't believe there are people outside of a courtroom,
Yes.
you know, showing support for an alleged cop killer.
Yep.
Like they had never seen that in their, you know, whole time of ever, you know, doing shows like this. And I think that's what they drew their attention to this case.
Yes.
Was, you know, wow, there are people who really are lending support to the accused, especially when it's a police officer, you know, and that was an interesting intro. And I think we had feelings about that throughout the show because John O'Keefe gets lost in this a lot.
Yes, John O'Keefe is the name of the victim.
Yes.
And yeah, don't want him to get lost and all of that.
But they start off with, I think, one of your favorite pastimes is going out and having a good time.
Yeah.
Right? So what can you tell us about that, Kimberly?
I don't do that so much.
I know.
They so there was a group of adults that were meeting up at a local bar for that night, and a big blizzard was coming in that night, supposed to start overnight, and like 12 inches of snow was predicted, like -0 temperatures, like wind, like blizzard means you have wind.
Yeah.
Like a lot of wind. We're from snowy area, so
we know all about that.
Like. Yeah. But it hadn't started yet, so they're going out that night, and Karen drove herself to meet John at the bar, and he had went there with friends or something.
Right.
So
right.
He's not driving. She is. She drove her car there.
Gotcha.
There's footage inside the bar of everybody being in there.
Mm-hmm.
She did talk about how their relationship was a little bit on the rocks that day. Like they had gotten into a little bit of an argument in the morning. So that's in the background, you know, of the events of this night. But I didn't think they looked like they weren't getting along on camera. I thought they looked fine on camera.
And I was just going to say that, you know, they had that argument in the morning, but it looked like they had kind of reconciled. It looked like they both were kind of having a good time at the bar.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, because
a little too much fun.
Yeah, they were pounding them back. Then, as they're winding down, one of the families they were with, the Alberts, invited everybody back to their house.
Right.
And on the show, on the 2020 show, it was stated that the Mr. Albert made the statement that my son's at the house, they're having a little party with his friends, so everybody come back to our house. And when I was watching all the footage and, YouTubers and everything talking about this case. The son was not mentioned at that time. So that was interesting that they said that on the show.
Yeah.
I thought.
I think the big thing about the bar scene, which it kind of started off at, I think they were trying to lay the foundation that they were having a good time, that, you know, there didn't seem like there was any arguments or anything. But they did show a couple clips that they referenced to back a little bit later. One was they showed Karen Reed pounding down some drinks. Now, she claimed during the 2020 interview, I had about 4 drinks and didn't finish them all. So I had 3 some drinks, right? Not a full 4 drinks because I didn't finish them all. The 2020 interviewer said, well, we have receipts of you getting 9 drinks.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big disparity. And one of the things that they tease early on and mention a little bit more later is after this whole of 9 hours after this whole event happened, after she was done drinking, they tested her blood alcohol level, and she read between a 7 and a 0.7 and a 0.8, and a 0.8 is above the legal limit. So she was legally drunk 9 hours later. So if she had, you know, the sum of 3 drinks, it sounds a little bit more like she had the sum of around 9 drinks. So that was number one. Number two was they showed John O'Keefe walking out of the bar with a glass
with the drink in his hand.
With a drink in his hand. So he took, which I didn't know you could do this.
I kept thinking that too. Like, what are they doing?
I know.
Walk out of bars, and I kept thinking the bar's watching it, going, "Hey, we want that glass."
And
No,
he's like taking it in. He's a police officer. He's taking
well,
an alcoholic drink into the vehicle where someone who is drunk is driving, and they're sitting in the passenger seat with a drink. That's like, what is going on in Boston?
There you go.
Craziness. But they did show, but I guess the point was, because they reference back to this later, that he did walk out of the bar with a glass of alcohol, you know, and took it in the vehicle with him when they left. Okay.
Yes.
So from there,
so
what happens?
The crime is that they go to the house party.
Yes.
And she said in the interview that she was having stomach problems and didn't feel like going in. She wanted to go home. He got out of the car to go into the house. She said she saw him go towards the side door. It was like a garage entrance door,
I think so. Yeah.
She did not say she saw him go in.
Correct.
But she was watching him go towards it.
Yep.
Then she mentioned grabbing her phone, because to me, it seemed like she was waiting for him to come back. And like and they didn't say this in the episode. This is just the way I took it, that she's waiting for him to come back. So she's pulling up a song on her phone that she's going to listen to as she's driving home and doing some other things. So she made it seem like I wasn't watching him.
Right.
I was looking at something else, but she's waiting and he never comes back.
Right.
So
for like 10 minutes.
For like 10 minutes. So she decides, I'm going to go home.
Right.
So she goes home.
Yes.
According to her,
Yep.
goes home, goes to bed, wakes up sometime throughout the night, and he's not home.
Right.
And he should have been home. She would have thought.
Yeah.
So she starts texting him, calling him, and they play those phone calls on the TV show, and she was mad. They were very mad messages, and, you know, she's thinking he's out doing something, you know, nefarious or with another woman or something like that. But obviously falls back asleep. And then when she wakes up in the morning and he's still not home, she panics and she calls a friend, and
who was at the party.
But then she went out by herself first. So she thought, I'm going to go back towards the bar.
Yeah. She went looking around the bars.
Because she said, because it was the blizzard. So she didn't know, like, were they letting people stay there because of the conditions or something like that, was the way she explained it. He wasn't there. So she went back home, or she went to that friend's house. She ended up picking up 2 friends, and then they went to John's house.
Right.
Because she had been out. So she picks up the friends. She's like, well, let's go back and see if he's back home now.
Right.
Because that's where she was originally. She was sleeping at his house.
Right.
So she's gone for a while, goes back. He's not back. So then they decide, go to the house where the party was. Like, we're
Correct.
going to backtrack. And I guess they only lived like a few streets away or something. Like, it wasn't far.
Didn't seem to be far.
She says they pull up. And by this time, it is like really snowing.
Right.
Like, though they interviewed one of the women that was in the car, and she was like, she was panicked. Like, Karen was panicked and not wanting to put her seatbelt on, just trying to hurry up and get there. And it's bad driving conditions. She was really concerned, but they pull up, and right away, Karen says, there he is, and jumps out. And I found it heart-wrenching when the friend said that she like jumped on him, like, because she knew he was freezing. He's laying in the snow.
Yeah.
And then it just seemed like chaos broke out.
Yeah.
From that point.
So the one friend was like a nurse or something in the medical field, because she told Karen, get off him.
Yes.
And let me do like
Some
CPR or whatever. And then told the other friend to call 911. And then pretty soon thereafter, the 911 people show up. I think it was EMTs, not police at first, but yeah, somebody ends up showing up. Now, this is where I was a little confused, and we talked a little bit about this after the episode.
It is confusing.
And I'm not 100% sure, but it almost seemed like he was not deceased officially on the scene, that they ended up taking him to the hospital. He was not DOA, but later declared unalived sometime after, which I found to be wow, that he was, for many, many, many hours, maybe, depending on whose version of this you believe, he was outside for a very long time and had weathered the literal storm for hours before he had gotten any help.
So they say,
depending on what version you believe. So, but he did officially succumb to blunt force trauma to the head and hypothermia.
Yes.
Okay.
So then it's a little confusing, the rest of the timeline of the day, the way they talked about, they were cutting to this and that, but she called her dad at some point and was so just upset. She made a comment of like, I don't want to live, without John, some kind of comment like that. And her dad must have reported it or something, because they admitted her for a hold at the hospital, mental health hold at the hospital. And I did know that she was at the hospital, at the same hospital that they brought John to, and had crossed paths with John's brother. And that did not go, like, the brother was mad, like, from the get-go. And I wondered how she had ended up there. Like, was she there to see him too? But according to the show, she was there because of the hold.
Mental health hold, yes.
And then when she was allowed to leave, which I can't believe they didn't keep her longer, but
well, I think she explained it away during the episode. She said, she's like, when something like this happens, you don't feel like, hey, I want to unalive myself. I can't see myself living without him, even though he makes me angry, and but I mean, I make her angry, but I mean, would she feel hurt if we've been together 27 some years? I mean, hopefully she feels a little bit, and you may say, like, hey, my whole life's been him. We so it could have been taken a little bit out of context, or it could have been a very good precautionary measure by her father to say, hey, let's make sure you're in the right state of mind to deal with everything that we're going to be dealing with, for the next few days. So.
True. So then she wanted to see the kids. So they went back with her dad, back to John's house. And at this point, John's family members are there. His parents are there. Only one of the kids was there.
Right.
But she described it as going into the house and immediately feeling like John's mom was suspecting her
Yes.
of whatever had happened.
Yes.
So she just got like that bad vibe. She said she went upstairs, talked to her dad, like, I want to leave. And then I don't know if she went home to her house or to her dad's house.
I know when she said she left, that's when either she made the decision or her father suggested to her to lawyer up.
Mm.
Like, that's when she was like, hey, I think they're looking at me, better get a lawyer.
Well, and if you think about it, the brother had already said something funky to her. The mom's now doing it. And this is like hours.
Yeah,
a
I
few
mean,
hours
immediately after. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can't blame her. And then it just goes from there with the law. The police show up. She eventually gets arrested. Does pay a bond, bails out, and then they have the trial.
So, point of clarification on my part, even though I'm a guilter, I am not a person that says just because she got a lawyer, that proves guilt.
Mhm.
I tell my family, I'm like, look, no matter what happens, it could be the most benign thing ever. But, sometimes people double talk and, you get tripped up because you're not in the right state of mind, and you could say something a little weird, so, and then that could be turned around on you and them not going after the right people because they're focusing on you. I suggest lawyering up. So I don't look at it as, an admission of guilt or innocence. I think it's just doing the right things because, the legal system is imperfect. It's not perfect.
Yep.
So, okay. My little 2 cents.
So during the trial, the defense is trying to prove that.
What is she charged? Before we get to the trial, what is she charged with? Because you and I went back and forth on this a few times.
Yes. She ended up being charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter while under the influence of liquor, is the way it was written.
Okay.
And leaving the scene of a possible homicide. I don't know how they worded it. Leaving the scene of a possible incident of some kind. Okay. Even without like the way they worded it. Yeah. Like maybe she didn't even know that it had happened, but she left.
Okay.
So there were 3 charges.
Gotcha.
But the defense was trying to prove that he did not die from her hitting him with the car.
Yes.
And the prosecution was saying she most certainly that when he got out of the car, she backed up and like a pretty long ways backed up and like kind of sideswiped him as he was walking up to the house. He fell and hit his head and left him there and drove home.
Yes.
But do you want to who wants to go first?
Well, I think there's more to the prosecution. There's less to the prosecution side than there is the defense side, right? So the prosecution is pretty cut and dry, everything that you just said, right? They were having arguments that day, even though it probably wasn't a big one. She was intoxicated, according to the prosecution, 9 drinks, blood alcohol level, over the limit 9 hours after, she had left the bar. So she was probably pretty intoxicated if she was driving around town. So argument, intoxicated. I think there was some issue with, a little bit of flirtation with somebody else on her part, that maybe she got in a I got caught moment, so all those things, general frustration about the relationship, and it just all got the best of her. And for some reason, maybe him going to this party, without her, when she's saying, hey, I'm not feeling well, come be with me, it's like, no, I'm gonna go party. All these things built up. She backed her car into him, hit him, whether it was on purpose or accidentally, and then left the scene, right? Didn't render any aid. And they felt, based on, the damage to the car, that she should have heard it and stopped and checked, but she left the scene, that, oh, what did I do? Right? Maybe a moment of clarity. Oh, what did I do? So that's the prosecution is pretty much stuck to that and nothing else, and then they have some pieces of evidence that they're claiming ties all that together, with some of the glass that he held, that he took in the car, that
they said
shattered.
that was embedded into the bumper.
Yeah.
On the 2020 show, and I missed that part of the hearings or the trial, but I didn't hear it described that way. But
yeah, I don't know if they said it, like embedded, like it was stuck in it. It was almost like there was like a pieces of it, like in the bumper ish, yeah, like around it and stuff. But yeah, so a piece of that glass was there. That glass was also, I believe, on the ground, along with the red and white tail light glass that they had. So there's a lot of speculation. Kim will get to it on her part of when and how did I get there, and all this stuff. But for the prosecution, it's pretty straightforward, and this is where I land, because I'm just going to take everything that's presented and say, okay, is there a possibility that this happened purposely? It's possible. Is it more likely that maybe it happened accidentally and there was a panic moment and I got out of there? That seems more likely. I would have to sit through the whole trial and listen to everything to say, do I believe it beyond a reasonable doubt? I can't go at this point anywhere else, blame this death on anything else. I believe he was struck by the vehicle, whether it was malicious or not. I don't know, but that's what I believe. And you have to take a very strong magnet to pull me off that and put me somewhere else, not 10 different things and have all the 10 things. Well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, all these 10 different things, and say, well, does that move you? No, it doesn't move me off it unless one scenario fits completely. Then I'm able to move off a different scenario. But those other scenarios don't include the taillight being broke, or or the glass being shattered. None of those things have anything to do with a dent in her car, so that's where I kind of sit now. On the defense side, listening to it, they got a slew of things that I'm considering.
Yeah. So the defense's point is that he did not die from being hit by a car, that someone else did it, that someone else was in that house that night. The people in that house are not talking. They're all there. This is what the defense is making it claim, like that they all got together and are covering up like what actually happened. The police never went in that house. So I was just sitting here thinking, like, when you were talking about the evidence you want to see, the defense called experts that testified about the pieces of plastic from the tail light and the glass. And the one expert said that the glass that was found did not match the glass from a drink glass. So where did that drink glass go? Is what I was just thinking about. Well, it was probably in that house, but nobody ever went in that house. So who knows where that drink glass ended up going? That's just my little side that I just thought of because you brought that up. So the defense's case was to show, well, first of all, they spent a lot of time talking about why nobody saw the body. If she hit him with the car, and he never made it in the house, they knew he was coming. People in that house knew he was coming. And in fact, I believe one of the women that they showed on the show, that Jen McCabe, I believe was texting him, like, where are you? Because she knew they were coming to the house. And he doesn't show up. And the defense spent a lot of time questioning everybody that was in that house. Could you see out a window? How many times did you walk towards the window? Did you go to the door? Did you open the door? People came to the house later that night. But nobody saw a body on the lawn, on the front lawn.
Can I speak to that for a second?
Yeah.
Because there's much more on the defense's side.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I pointed out to you today, but you said you did actually know where the body was. But the activity in that house would be to the left, because they're from the front door. If I'm looking out the front door, the activity to that house would be to the left, because that's their driveway, and that's where people would be coming in and out. Where his body was way up and to the right on the far, if let's just say northeast corner of their property. Like, why somebody would be dropped off way over there when your driveway is way over here seemed odd. And that's where his body was, way over there. So if I'm looking out the front door, I'm looking at the driveway. I'm looking this way. Or has anybody pulled up? Nope. Don't see anybody. I'm not looking way to the far right piece of my property all the way up here, and it is way far away. It's weird.
I mean, it wasn't that far. It was their house set far back, so he was more towards the road.
Yeah.
And they didn't have that giant wide of a front yard. I mean, he was there, and I don't think it was way on the edge. But yeah, I understand your point. But still, if you're driving up to a house and there's a body laying somewhere close to the road, you'd think someone would have seen it.
Yeah.
They also had the Snowplow Driver that went by like around 4 or 5 in the morning. And he described how big his truck was, and the lights on his truck lit up like 4 feet on each side or something. And he was always really cautious of like not wanting to hit animals and stuff like that. And he saw nothing. So,
and it was curious that Karen Reed said when she saw him, she thought he got hit by a plow.
Yeah, she thought, well, maybe he got hit by a plow. But I mean, that's rational thinking. Like, what happened to him? Like, what happened to him?
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought they spent an absurd amount of time on that in the trial. Like, that took up a lot of it. They called experts for the injuries that he had. So the blunt force trauma on the back of his head, I could understand that being from falling and hitting the curb or pavement or something like that. But he had black eyes,
brain swelling.
Yeah, and I this wasn't in the trial, but I think I remember his brother describing him when he saw him in the hospital, and I just think his face was like had a lot of injury. But the thing that kind of did it for me was he had these scratches on his whole forearm, like from his elbow to his wrist, and you could not convince me that much plastic. There were like probably 8 marks, and they were pretty sequential, going up and down. Like, it just wasn't random, jagged. I got clipped by some broken pieces of a tail light into my arm. To me, they looked like dog bites and scratches. And the defense, that's what they were trying to prove. They called experts to testify to that, and that was their finding. And I kept thinking, I was trying to give, trying to see both sides of this, and I thought, well, it could be an animal while he was laying out there during the night, but they said they could tell it was before death, that those bites and scratches happened. And the people in the house did have a large, I don't know if it was a German Shepherd or some kind of dog like that. Then they were, you asked about like the tail light. They have video footage. So there's like a ring cam or something at John O'Keefe's house. And there's footage of Karen Reed driving into the driveway that night when she got home and backing. I believe that's when it was her getting home that night, backing in, and his car is there, and she hits on her right tail light side, bumps his car, and she was going super slow. It was just a bump. They had to like really slow it down and really look to see like the tires on his car did move, like there was contact. And then so that's when it could have gotten broken. They did a lot with the health data. So they were looking at, because he had an iPhone. So he had an iPhone under him.
Mm-hmm.
So he obviously had it on him. But when they looked at his health data, it showed him taking so many steps that would be way far away from where he was, enough steps to get into the house that he went up and down steps in a, would be like going up and down steps in a house. They also, this isn't from the 2020 show. So the 2020 show did not talk about
any of this.
They mentioned the marks on his arm.
Yeah.
They did show that.
Yep.
The family was very offended. On the show, they talked about how the family was very offended every time they showed that in the courtroom.
No, because they released that before the trial. That was a part of an autopsy report. And they took this photo and put it out there for public opinion and say, these are dog bites. These are dog's bites. And that's like, the family was like, wait a minute, this is usually left for trial. Why are you taking this out there and showing it to the public? I guess there's good and bad with that, right? We're complaining the opposite on the Koberger case, that they're not giving us anything for us to debate on. Mm-hmm. And this shows you kind of why, because someone's going to take and say, oh, those could be dog bites. Those could be raccoon bites. Those could be shards of glass. Those could be anything. Anybody, any expert could come up and say, I can make that fit this.
Okay, so when they talked about the defense in the show, they mainly focused on just a couple things. So they talked about that, I don't know if he's a sergeant, officer, proctor. He was kind of like the lead guy, right? Was he the one that used all the foul language?
He was.
Okay, so in the 2020 show, they showed him on a stand and also talked about how he got in trouble for his messages that were discovered talking about Karen Reed, and it was so vile. Oh my God, it was so bad. He ended up losing his job over that.
Yep.
Did they mention in the show that there was an FBI investigation?
That there was another investigation going on about him, and that he was originally suspended but has been since let go.
But there's an investigation going on in that whole department.
Oh yeah, yeah,
so
for sure.
That also makes things suspicious, because and also why a lot of the community members turned on the police, like they just didn't trust the police and were on the side of Karen Reed. Like there was a lot of community members that once they caught wind of this kind of stuff, that's stupid. What 2020 kind of made it seem like that was the turning point of the community support for her, that started having people. And it was also because of that YouTuber Turtle Boy. Because I am telling you, there are some people on YouTube that they do these FOIA requests and they get a hold of documents and stuff. And he may have been the reason some things were released out into the public that maybe they didn't want released, and makes people start questioning and saying, hey, what's going on? And So the show really did focus a lot on that.
Mhm.
So one of the other points that they brought up in the show was, well, first of all, her defense attorney Alan Jackson, they really they were like painted him as a big deal. He came from California. He was coming in to put on a great defense.
There's something I want to ask you about when you finished
So
saying the
there was
27
a text message that Jen McCabe was
Google search,
one
right?
of the it was a Google search. Yes. She was out that night at the house at the party, and she was one of the women that Karen called the next morning. But they found a Google search on her phone that said it was supposed to be how long to die in the cold, and it ended up saying Haas long to die in the cold. So that was kind of a funny little thing. But the defense was saying she did that at 2:27 a.m.
Yes.
And that was also one of the things that everybody was like, what? And we were talking about this earlier, and I did look this up. So the prosecution was saying, no, she did that in the morning after they found him, and Karen asked her to Google it because they just found him. He's been out in the cold. Google it. So the defense proved through their digital technology, like going into the phone, the iCloud, and all that stuff, they had the timestamp that said she did it at 2:27. Well, to your point, the prosecution brought their expert, and they were claiming she had already had that tab open from during the night at 2:27. So when she went back into it at 6 something or whenever they found him in the morning, she Googled it then, but it's still going to read as 2:27 when she originally opened that tab. So you had the defense saying, no way, that's not how it works. And the prosecution saying, that's why. So to me, I think she made it at 2:27. I don't know. But what did you want to? You wanted to go back and talk to about something.
Well, there was a statement that there's two statements. So the first one I'm aware of during the 2020 show when they were talking about Proctor and some of these things that the defense was bringing up. They were like, look, both things can be true. And I've been saying both things can be true for well over a year, right?
Yeah, we say that. Yeah.
So when I heard them say that in the 2020 show that, look, Proctor can be an idiot and Karen Reed could have hit her boyfriend. Both things can be true. So I like that. There was another moment in the 2020 show, and I asked you to write it down. They had this little 2-word phrase. And I want
Occam's razor.
Occam's. I don't even know how to say it.
Occam's.
Occam's. Who's
Razor.
Occam's?
Oh, I looked it up. He was like a philosopher from I don't know, the 13th century. And he didn't coin it, but the types of things he talked about and quotes he had were kind of along that type of philosophy. But it means don't over-explain things.
Right.
Don't go digging deep into things.
The simplest thing can be true.
The simplest explanation is probably the right explanation.
Right. So the defense tried to use this. Say that again.
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor.
No, the prosecution did. No?
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me get it out, my love. Okay. So the defense tried to use this
Occam's razor
during the 2020 show and say, look, you are overthinking, all this stuff. This is, this didn't happen the way the prosecution's saying. And the interviewer said, the prosecution is saying the same thing. Like, don't overthink this. Don't add in all this other minutia. It's just a simple fact that she hit him. He passed away. Don't know if it's on purpose but the simplest explanation could be true. And the defense guy got so like, No. So,
He did call him out on that
yeah,
on the show.
it was
Yeah,
kind
he
of
did.
funny, but it goes back to the point that I don't know if I should push here a little bit because it may not be in this episode. It may get edited out, but
Mhm.
I think we have a lot of debate on anything that the prosecution brings. I'm going to look at that as okay, I see and understand that because that's how my mind's thinking. I believe she's guilty. So if I hear a expert for the prosecution, I'm going to lean towards their expert ability because I already have a predisposition of guilt. You have a predisposition disposition
Disposition.
of innocence. So when they bring an expert forward or there's some aha moment, it's going to be, see, this is a big aha moment about innocence. And if you are square, if you have no predisposition going in, and if you're a juror, like I try to start in the middle and let the facts take me where
I do too.
they need to go.
Mhm.
If I'm sitting there in the middle and I'm getting both of these coming at me without that disposition, why am I struggling with that word?
Mhm.
Um, it is hard for me to say, okay, I'm over here, I'm over here. What it does do, though, is start to put in reasonable doubt. And I think that's where this case
Tons.
just
Mhm.
fell into a, washing machine full of reasonable doubt. And ultimately, I mean, unless there's more you want to say about the defense.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
just a couple.
Okay. Go ahead.
So they collected when they started. So they did not immediately find red plastic pieces from the taillight. They claimed because of the snow.
Yeah.
And they were out there with leaf blowers. And oh my gosh, I laughed at that because we come from an area where there's a lot of snow. Do you think the leaf
No.
blower would blow the snow?
No.
No, that's not enough power.
No.
Like that was ridiculous.
This was a heated leaf blower, but
Right,
but it was
right.
just a
That's
leaf blower.
not going to touch it.
Yeah.
Trust us. It's
Yeah.
not going to
No,
touch it.
not the kind of snow we get.
No. And then, so when they did find the plastic pieces eventually, they put them in Stop and Shop grocery plastic bags.
Yes.
Not even evidence bags.
No.
They took red Solo cups from a nearby house, someone's house, and put evidence in those.
Yes.
Like it was just ridiculous
Yes.
police work. And they did talk about that on the 2020 show.
Yes.
So then, like in the show, they closed with the prosecution was focusing on, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Like she's admitting it. This is what happened.
Let's talk about that for a second because we
And-
talked about that off camera.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's watched the movie My Cousin Vinnie, but in the movie My Cousin Vinnie, that was one of the prosecution's way to say that the two kids in that movie were guilty because when the sheriff was questioning the kids and said, "At what point did you shoot the clerk?" And the Ralph Macchio character said, "I shot the clerk?"
Yep.
As a question, and he repeated it. He's like, "I shot the clerk?" And he said it like a couple times. So when he went to trial and testified, he said, "Well, he admitted that he shot the clerk."
Yep.
And the judge said, "Well, what did he actually say?" He goes, "I shot the clerk." And then he asked him again. He said, "Yes." And he said again, "I shot the clerk." But without context or the right punctuation,
Right.
it looks incriminating. And with Karen Reed, she was
She spoke to that
adamant,
on the 2020 show.
very adamant about, I had a did in front of that and a question mark afterward.
She said it started with a did and ended with a question
Yeah.
mark.
And I was like, I even looked to you at this point and I was like, I can see that because that was a big thing in the My Cousin Vinnie movie. And if you never saw that movie, please watch it. It is hilarious. It is a great movie.
That's a good one.
Yeah. But yeah, so I did kind of like understand that it is context when quoting somebody else
Yeah.
because that sounds incriminating. And she's like, I was asking a question, not saying I did it,
Right. Which her friend that she had with her that morning was like saying I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. So she kind of, if she was a friend, she kind of turned on her with that.
Right.
So they ended the 2020 episode with talking about how it was a mistrial.
Yes.
But they didn't go into the details about it at
Mm-mm.
all. And they did say that her family filed a civil
lawsuit. Yep.
civil lawsuit against her. So yeah, that's how they ended it. And the next court date is going to be January. It's supposed to start January 27th.
So I want to end this with my hypothesis of what happened. And then I'd like to hear yours. So
Yes.
narrow down all the things that you got and let's give me.
You always think
give me.
much of that.
Oh, okay. If it's only one, I'd love to hear one, but I've heard a bunch. But if it's only one, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what I think happened. So after watching this show, I looked at a couple other things. I can't say that I was engrossed in this, but I think from what I saw that it's weird where she was dropping him off at or where the body ended up at. And never once did she say, my car was nowhere near this spot. There's no way I could have hit him. She never once says that. She could have easily said, I pulled into the driveway and was waiting for him to get out. But she puts herself, or by not testifying or showing anything to the contrary, she puts herself right where the body is and doesn't dispute it one bit. So given that, and given everything that happened that day, there was probably emotions going on. He probably didn't get out the car and say, I love you. I'll see you in a couple hours. It was probably a lot less than that, and the way I saw some 3D animation about how the prosecution had all this car data and stuff, and it shows that she pulled forward a little bit, sped up, backed up, and then pulled forward again and took off. And the way the impact would have happened would have had John right near the curb, because that's where they said he hit his head. So even though the 6,000-pound vehicle hit him, it wasn't that impact that got him. It was the impact of him hitting the ground that gave him the head injury that caused him to ultimately pass away. He didn't die on the spot. It was that, along with hypothermia, that ultimately did him in. There's a lot to be made about the snowplow driver, but if he was at this point earlier in the night and then a plow comes through, whether he said he didn't see anything. So if his body was there, and I say if, just to give you context, if his body was there and the plow came through and the snowplow driver never saw anybody, is it possible he could have been dust covered over? The plow comes through, because you're not plowing no snow. There had to have been snow, which it wasn't snowing that much earlier. He was covered, and then all of a sudden the plow comes in and pushes him into the grass with the phone underneath him. That's my thought, my theory. And I could see that she hit him, whether it was on purpose. I can't say that. Did she hit him on accident? It's too much damage to the car, the glass in the bumper. Why is there damage to the car at all in many different places? And how does glass get there? And all this stuff, too coincidental. That's what I think happened. And I think if I was the sitting juror, you'd have to get me off of that. I concede the rest to you.
I think she was waiting for him to come back out to the car to go home with her. He didn't, so she just drove home. I think he went into that house and got into a huge confrontation and fight with probably the son of that family. And I think he got the crap kicked out of him in there, and it was way worse than they expected. I don't think they expected, it to get that bad or be that bad. And they put him outside, and they have a dog in there. And I think, a protective dog and their owner getting into a fight
True.
is going to jump in the mix
Sure.
and bite him on the arm, scratch, get a hold of him on the arm. And they put him outside probably before sunrise or whatever, probably after that plow went by.
Could have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And we do know that they got rid of their dog shortly after that. They did some construction work to the floor in one of their rooms. They did not mention to the police. The police did not even know that the son was there for like a year or something. They never interviewed him or anything. Everybody that was at that house refused to mention the son's name until like way later. I don't know how it got brought up, but yeah, that was all.
And okay, I'll leave it at that.
So then I think the taillight might have gotten cracked when she bumped into that car. But then I think once someone got a hold of that car and did more damage to it, because even in the trial, they inverted the video. The prosecution did not want to show the police on video on the right side of that car when it was in their possession. And the defense called them out for inverting the video. And I swear, if you look up this part of the trial, if you haven't seen it, people magically appear and disappear like on the footage. Like it's crazy.
So you're also claiming there's a cover up. Like not only did the
there's a cover up. Yeah.
And Proctor's probably part of that.
Yes.
And the Alfreds.
Yes, because I believe he wasn't even the original person in charge of the case. It was someone else, but he like inserted himself to be in charge because he's friends with the family. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's my take.
So what do you guys think? What's your take? We'd like to hear a little bit more about this. And we may even do a live to maybe gather some folks' opinions about this.
It'd probably be a lot of fun to discuss it live.
Yeah.
You never know. I don't know.
I don't know if I could take it. There seems to be a lot of good energy around. She's been wrongfully, I don't know, not convicted yet, but accused.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to say too, I know we're trying to end this, but did you hear about the TikTok killer case that just had Wade Wilson, I think was his name? Like there's so much. I didn't come to you and say, oh, there's a conspiracy, like he really didn't do it. There's so much evidence about him. I'll show you
Oh, okay.
That case, but that's a recent one. I'm like, that's the guy. Like they have so much evidence about him and the Long Island serial killer,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, oh, he's innocent. Those police are, corrupt. No, they have the evidence. They're showing us what the evidence is. And I have no questions. I think they got the right person.
And I think when it has to do with somebody killing a cop, there's going to be a lot more energy and they're going to want a conviction on somebody killing a cop. So things always get done by the book 100%, probably not. There's a lot of people on death row that shouldn't have been there. So yeah, I'm fully aware of it too, but I need enough to say, it can't be conjecture. Like, give me a data point. Like you mentioned the Apple Watch and things like that. I mean, those are compelling pieces of evidence, even in the Koberger case, right? If Cy can come up with something that, shows something specific, I'm here for it. I want to see it, but you got to get me off the DNA. You got to get me off the glass in the bumper, not just a little bump in the driveway, but a dent on this part of the car and then the glass breaking over here. If you just barely hit the car, how'd you get the dent over here and how did glass show up? Right? You got to get me off all that stuff.
I understand, but I like that part of it, and it's frustrating on one hand, and it's what makes it interesting on the
Mhm.
other hand when you look at a case and you're like, that's just doesn't seem right. Like there's just something wrong there. But sometimes they don't give you all the information, so
Right.
you can't say what it is 100%
Sure.
because they're not giving it to you. But
And I'll also say, what was the defense attorney's name again?
Alan Jackson,
He is required by law to defend his client with veracity.
yeah,
And he's doing
he
that.
did.
And he's doing that. And I hope Koberger's what's her name?
Oh yeah, Ann Taylor.
Ann
Yeah,
Taylor.
she is.
I hope she does it with
Mhm.
veracity, right? You know,
She is.
so yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you back here next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.